So we have all this data that basically everybody that could afford to leave, didn't have to stay because of work or family or cost, got the hell out of there. So what does that say for when things open back up? Are people going to take a long, hard look at, closer proximity, higher density areas and find them less desirable? Or is this going to be like a lot of other things? We have super short-term memories. We're going to go back to loving what we love, and we're just going to move forward and move on.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else. With your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik, and with me, as always, is John Cohen. How we doing?
Good. Hanging in there. Another day. We finally had some good weather up here, so it was a good weekend. And now we're just sitting tight, protesting and crazy shit. I saw it was like a meme or something. It was like, who had violent protests in Armageddon bingo, right? It was relatively funny, but it's just fucking crazy what's going on.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a crazy time. I think obviously what happened is a tragedy without saying. And I think, it's tough to really understand when, I'm in the position I am and, we're all in the position we are. It's tough to really understand what's going on. So I'm just trying to, take in what a lot of other people are saying, who do experience it and also just have more knowledge on it and, just trying to respect what's going on. But, obviously, not put my foot in my mouth. So, it just sucks. Let's put it that way.
It does.
I don't know what else to really say about it. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm not the person to really talk about it and do it, but it's just a really shitty situation. So
that's for sure.
It's been tough to watch for sure. But without going too much into that, we got a really great guest on today. I'm very excited to hear his story, hear his experiences and insights, and have him share them with you, the audience, the listener, and hopefully you can pick some stuff up from him and everything he's done. So with that being said, Charles, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, gentlemen. I just get in off the where I was protesting, so just to come in on your show. Yeah, so I got to go right back out there. They're looking for me right now. So
that's good. So can you take a couple minutes, tell people a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your background, and kind of what you do?
Sure. So my name is Charles Dobens. I am the multifamilyattorney.com. I teach people how to buy apartment complexes and apartments, and I've been doing it for years, probably since probably about 12 years now. That's what my entire law practice is all about. And as I tell my students, I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. You're going to hire a lawyer. I act more as a consultant because my clients are all over the country, and I'm only licensed to practice here in Massachusetts. So I have been buying, owning, and operating multifamily property since before the crash, and I'm still alive and standing here to tell you about it. I have the marks and the scars to show you, and that's one thing I teach my students is you got to buy it the right way. You listen to these guys out there that tell you you can overpay for property because the prices just keep going up on it. I'm like, that guy was obviously 12 years old because he wasn't around last time when my properties didn't come back in value after the crash. So, but now I love doing that, and also now my focus is we just sold 2 of our complexes, and we're going to start looking at actually building apartments. I am here. I have a house in Duxbury, Mass, and I'm actually up here in my office up in Nashua, New Hampshire, which is where I was originally born and raised. And the market here is unbelievable. I mean, the golf course that I grew up playing on, 36 holes, this is its last year. The family sold it. Yeah, they sold it to put in an Amazon distribution center, 5,000 new workers, and they've got no place to live. And you go into apartments.com, you just type in any of the workforce housing style property on southern New Hampshire along the Massachusetts border, and there's no vacancy. there is zero vacancy. Everything is on a waiting list. So that's what we are. As a matter of fact, this week I'll be making my first offer on land, and then I've got one right behind it, and we just see that as being the opportunity in the future is to get out there and develop these properties. And we've looked at stick built, we've looked at modular, and guys, there's a place right up the street from you in Westchester County that does a great job with modular apartment buildings. So, we've been talking to them quite a bit. So that's my thing. And I teach, my students I speak all over the country, and my program is called the Owner Forum. And I help people own apartments the right way. That's it. That's the key.
Awesome. I love it. So one thing I think maybe you'll have to start distinguishing when you say you owned before the crash, I'm assuming you meant 2008. Considering what we're in now.
Oh, this is nothing. This is kid stuff. Come on.
We'll see what happens, right?
This is
still in the middle of it. It's not over yet. So
this is like nothing we've ever seen before. Hopefully we'll never see it again. But I really think we were coming into this problem with such great numbers. Everything was working right for us. And the big thing that you always have to remember, guys, we sell a product. And our product is in such demand because the supply is just not there. And if you go back, I did a whole webcast on Big Shifts Ahead, the book by Chris Porter and I can't remember John's last name, but that book will tell you what is going on in this country and what's going to go on through 2025. And our business will continue to be strong. We got this blip. We got this, all these rent strikes that people are talking about, but we'll survive it. It's not like because the reason is we've benefited from sound financial underwriting of our properties, as opposed to 2008, where it was just stupid. I love that movie, The Big Short. My most favorite scene is the stripper scene. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen Carell realizes the stripper's got 6 condos. It's just, that doesn't make any sense.
That was after I watched the movie, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I referenced that scene all the time when he's like, "Oh, my other place," and he's like, "How many places do you own?" 7 different condos. It's like,
exactly.
Okay, but no, I happen to agree. I think the economic fundamentals heading into this were different than the past. I was younger in the past. That's the truth, but. When you watch a movie like The Big Short and you read about the stuff that was going on, you have to feel good that as Chris mentioned, we have no idea where this is going to shake out, but economically and fundamentally and just population growth and demographics, and that book is another great book. You got to feel good about the fundamentals, especially in the housing sector. So you feel a little bit better about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you expand a little bit on I haven't read the book. I'm sure there's plenty of people listening that haven't read the book. Can you take a couple minutes and expand on what you mean by, the big shifts ahead and why we're in such a good position? Like, what is your takeaway from what they said and your spin on it, basically?
All right. John Burns, I just remember his last name, and Chris Porter. Burns owns the consulting firm that basically does economic statistics for real estate. That's his primary focus. And he and Chris Porter wrote this book called Big Shifts Ahead. And they had me at hello pretty much when he was explaining how he's not going to use the old terminology of baby boomers and millennials and Gen X and Gen Y, because that is nothing more than a descriptor for birth rates, and it doesn't describe real generations. And so instead he took everybody from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way up to 2000, and everybody got a 10-year, decade-long window. That was it. So I was born in the 60s, and we're called the equalers, and that's the generation that the women started to become more equal, and men started to stay home at more, and women's incomes went up, and that's what happened during my generation. Then he tells a story that, like my generation, people born in the 60s, they have the lowest amount of equity than any other generation at this time, because we got our asses kicked when we got out of college, we went right into a recession. Then in 2000, the .com blow up, and then the Big Short blow up. We got killed when our peak earning years were all happening at those times when we were losing our shirts. And so that's why my generation is the they call it equal, also has the lowest amount of equity. Now, the way he explained it that I totally got was the baby boomers, by definition, are anyone born from 1946 to 1964. I was born in 1964. I have zero in common with somebody born in 1946. That guy's looking at, he's picking out caskets, and I'm still trying to get kids through college. So I have nothing in common with that guy. And so they broke down the generations. And then they lay on top of it, obviously their focus is on housing, but they talked about, the generation, the millennials right now, or the people, I can't remember what he calls people born in 2000, but they anticipate that 72% of that generation will never own homes. Mm-hmm. Will never own homes. They're just going to be renters. And that's okay. It's not, we always thought, like when I got out of college, hey, I have to buy a home because that's what everybody does. They don't have that attitude. Mm-hmm. They have a totally different mindset. And we, as producers of a product that they buy, we have to understand their mindset and give them what they need. So that's how, I did I think you can go on my website and find the link to it. But that's was a great book. And man, that's what made me realize I got to build. I can't just sit around and wait for deals to crop up. The demand will always be high. I used to say things like, the best markets are the ones that are picking up congressional seats, because that way you can tell where the people are migrating to. The North is losing congressional seats. The South is picking up congressional seats. So the growth is in the South. In actuality, and this is what they talked about in the book, all markets are growing. All markets, even if they're losing congressional seats, they're just not growing as fast as these other places. Mm-hmm. And they really break it down into where the growth is. I know, Chris, when you and I were talking last time, and I saw your portfolio and where you were. You're Ohio, but down there in Jacksonville, man, that's just, forget about it. That place is just going to continue to take off. So, and it's all spelled out in this book. It's a fantastic, and this book was written 5 years ago. Yeah. And, it was, I'd love to talk to the guys and find out what did they do right? What did they do wrong? And so far, by my reading of it, they've nailed it. They absolutely nailed it.
I would say the best part, what I liked about the book, and it's actually sitting in our office on Anthony's desk, Chris. So if you want to read it, it's there.
Chris, there are nice pictures. You can, if you
it is. It's got good graphs.
You went to Hofstra.
I'll just take the pictures. That's it then.
So, yeah.
But what they do really good is they break it down. That 10-year window, because they make a lot of references early on to millennials and Gen X, and they there's 20-year gaps, right?
Yeah.
I'm a millennial, but I have nothing in common with the younger side of the demographic. Right. So they take it one step further, and I like that. And when I first read it, I said, it's just their way to sell some books by like recoding all the names, right? Just being a little different. But there was a lot more that went into it, and I think that's the piece of the puzzle for the multifamily and housing in general that is pretty exciting. And they do a really good job just even talking about like interests and like, this group, has more interest on Facebook, and this group is more, they do a really good job at just really breaking down, the mindset of each 10-year gap. So I think anyone in the multifamily space or housing space, you should read the book. It's just fundamental for housing.
And another thing that they talked about that was a real eye-opener was immigrants and the importance of immigrants to our society, and that we cannot continue to grow with just our current population base. We have to bring in immigrants, or everything will implode. That's the only way we're going to survive. So very cool.
Yes, I think it's interesting. I think one thing I thought of was whenever somebody's defined like millennials or Gen Z, because I'm towards the quote unquote younger end of millennials, like I'm the tail end of it. I don't relate at all with the older end of it. I mean, I do now because I'm older and I'm, more of an adult than I was a few years ago, but 3, 4, 5 years ago didn't relate to the eldest millennials because they were, mid 30s, give or take. And I couldn't relate. And it's interesting because for me, I relate to like both sides a few years, but I also know that there's, so many people even within the classification that are very different. Like I have several friends that are looking to buy homes, that want to own homes and stay here. And I have so many friends that are looking to move away to more affordable places. So I think it's got to be a really good balancing act of, where do we stop the classification? Like how granular do we get? Because then at some point you're just getting too in the weeds. And I think it's an overload of information and you can't even take it in. So I do think it's interesting to hear them break it down into 10-year gaps because it probably is more relatable, but I have a tough enough time of keeping track of 3, 4, 5 classifications of people. Now, if you're telling me I've got to keep track of the names for 10 classifications of people, I don't know if I personally can keep track of that, but maybe everybody else can.
There are about 3 classifications that we as apartment owners need to focus on. And it's really the last 3, the most recent 3. But you talk about getting granular. Just think about this. When he described this, it threw me for a loop. And I believe if I say this wrong, I might be off in the decades, but you'll get the concept. The people that were born at the early end of the 80s, they are doing much better than the people in the same decade who were born at the end of the decade. Because the people who were born at the beginning purchased homes in the early 2000s. Before the crash, they built up equity. The people who were born in the end of the 80s bought homes right when it crashed. They lost their shirt. And these are people all within the same decade. So you talk about granularity. Well, boy, yeah, there's an example of people within the same decade who have big shifts between them. But, one of the other ones is, you talk about having friends who are buying houses, having friends who are looking to move home. One thing that they talked about that was really interesting is the people who were born in the 50s couldn't wait to get out of their houses. They got out of their parents' home. They never wanted to live with their parents. They got married earlier than other generations. Their children are staying home and living at home, and they want them to. The parents love it when their kids come back. I tell you, all my kids came back because of COVID, but hey, it's great having them around. I love having them around. I wonder when this whole thing is going to end, but the U-Haul truck just got back from Harlem last week. They all moved out of New York City, so I don't know when they're going back. So
that's the other thing too. I was thinking about is, and I was happy you answered when the book was written 5 years ago. Obviously, no one saw this happening, and this is something that we had talked about a little bit previously, and John and I have spoken about with numerous people in between ourselves is how does this new wave of awareness on diseases and close proximity affect future desires in housing and, living space and things of that nature? Because tons of people, anybody that basically could afford to leave New York City flocked away. It's shown in mail forwarding, in tracking cell data, and just, common sense and seeing what's happened. The most populated, the higher income areas within New York City and the surrounding boroughs, they're desolate. There's nobody there. So we have all this data that basically everybody that could afford to leave, didn't have to stay because of work or family or cost, got the hell out of there. So what does that say for when things open back up? Are people going to take a long, hard look at closer proximity, higher density areas and find them less desirable? Or is this going to be like a lot of other things? We have super short-term memories. We're going to go back to loving what we love and we're just going to move forward and move on. So I think that's one of the things too that could see a change in what we were talking about of home ownership versus renting, of maybe now there's a greater importance of having the backyard, having the extra space, being able to get away, being able to work from home. And people now are going to place a greater emphasis on purchasing that home instead of renting it versus, most people are just going to rent an apartment, I think, than buy a condo, at least in my opinion. I could be totally wrong. But when I hear just within my own sphere of knowing people, I hear very few people talk about buying a condo versus renting an apartment in New York City. But when they talk about living out on Long Island or in Westchester or in Jersey or Connecticut, significantly more people are looking to buy a home instead of rent a home. So I wonder if that shift is going to change too, where we were definitely trending towards more renters nationwide. And now do we see more of a shift towards people valuing the ability to actually own a home and have more space? So that's something that's been playing in my mind a lot recently. And curious to hear what you think.
I think the answer is, like we're talking about, it's generational. When you're talking about, what's going to happen after this COVID thing? Are we going to go back to the same old, same old? I think the older generations are looking to go back to the same old, same old. I think the younger generations are saying, hey, we just got a glimpse of a different way of life. And that looked pretty good. I know that my daughter's boyfriend, he works for a Fortune 500 company out in San Francisco, and he's working remotely. And he's just been notified that they will continue to work remotely through January 1st. And even then, they may not come back to an office. They may do everything remotely after that point. And everyone's okay with that.
Yeah.
My next door neighbor, he says that their productivity is higher now because of it. And that part of it is changing. So I think the younger generations of people that use computers all day long and can take their laptop anywhere, that this could change everything for them. The older generation, hey, I want to go down to the country club. I want to sit with my buddies at the bar. I want to go, hit the golf ball and not have to worry about, touching the pin. For crying out loud, gosh. And so that's, I think it's going to be a generational answer.
I also think the other thing that the other underlying factor there, as I agree 100%, because my dad, even his office told him, work remotely for, perpetuity, right? Forget about it. They closed their New York City office. They're based out of Jersey. And he's a lawyer, and they sue a lot of people, so they need a New York address. So they said, you live in Long Island, go get a little office space in Long Island. And now he doesn't have to do a 2.5-hour commute every day. But the other thing in that bucket, you still got to remember the affordability to buy a house. You may not want to live in an apartment complex. And maybe super urban areas. New York is New York. It'll always be New York. I think it's going to get punched in the teeth, and it might come down a little bit. I do think opportunities in New York will start showing themselves again. But the younger demographic, they just can't afford to buy the houses that they want. Housing prices in Long Island, Connecticut, not parts of Jersey, you can't just go out and buy a house, even if you really want one, unless you want to go really far out on Long Island, or you're gonna have to sacrifice neighborhood. And I don't think the younger demographic is gonna sacrifice neighborhood to afford a house where they can get a really nice apartment. Now, maybe the apartments have to change, but the affordability of buying a house is still super expensive, and that's still what I think is going to be a major barrier to people not wanting to live in an apartment because of this. I still think they're going to have to. Do I think I want to build Class A luxury high rise? No, but I still think that B and C space is just they can't just go out and buy a house tomorrow. It's very difficult for them. Not only because mortgage restrictions are harder, but the earned income, they just might not have it. So I think that's another major barrier that will keep the apartment world strong.
And the deductibility of the mortgage interest is gone. I mean, they talked about that in the book. And, why own? I mean, that was such a great reason for, and that was why I bought my first place is, to have the tax deductibility of it. But other than that, it's gone. But let's talk for a moment about something you mentioned, and that's the A's and the B's and the C class properties. The problem that all of these countries up here in New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. Let me talk just about New Hampshire because I've read the law from start to finish. In New Hampshire, the building of apartments tends to be entirely Class A, luxury. Mm-hmm. And obviously because of the cap rates and the rents that you can get, that's why. You can afford to build in those communities if you're getting that type of return. Marcus Millichap, I went to one of the regional conferences in Boston a couple months ago, and they talked about the difference in occupancy rates between A and C over the next 5 years. And they called C something different at the time. It was novel to me. Something different than what we call C. For them, C-class property is new construction, but workforce housing. C is workforce housing. I look at C-class properties, 1970s construction, flat roof, single pane windows, chiller boiler systems. That's a C-class property. In the new world, C-class are workforce housing with no amenities. Now, the only way you can build those types of places in all those communities that you just talked about, and especially up here in New Hampshire, is you've got to get the communities on board to reduce the density requirements, to change the zoning requirements, to allow you to do certain things. You'll put a couple of units into workforce housing rates, but I can't, like I just looked at a 26 acre parcel of land that we're probably gonna develop. Right now, by right, I can do 72 units. Well, 72 units is cutting it close for me. I got to get 100 units on that property, and they want these units because they know the demand, that people aren't living there, but people can't buy in their community. They're going to have to lay off teachers. They want to get more people into their community. So they're going to have to work with me in order for me to walk in and buy that land and start to develop it. And so, you can start taking advantage of those changes in the law in order to successfully and financially successfully build C-class properties.
Yep. Did you say 26 acres?
Yeah.
72 units?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's 3 units an acre. That's the craziest lowest density I think I've ever heard of. 7,500. Well, I got wetlands on the property too. So Gotcha.
Not all buildable. So it's 7,500 square feet per unit is what they allow by right. So that's what they were coming up with.
Gotcha.
And these are the fun things that you when you go from the owning operating side to over to the developing side. These are the new things that you get to learn, and it's I love it, man. It's you're doing something different. You're creating something that didn't exist until you came along. That's how you create value. On the multifamily side, the performing side, the way you create value is you increase the rents, you cut the expenses. That's how you create value.
Mm-hmm. So talk about that a little bit, because I think there are so many people, ourselves included, who would love to do, new development, looks nice, is fresh, is just something that is more appealing to people that do it, right? Newer is somewhat better in that regard. What's the transition been like for you? How have you been moving over to that side? Because you don't just snap a finger and understand how to develop, how to find properties, have a track record that sellers are willing to work for you. What has been your strategy to be able to move into that sphere?
Great. Excellent. I love that question, Chris. I've been an absolute sponge. One thing you learn is when you don't know, if you don't know how you're going to get your client off, you read the law. Make sure you know the law. So I've been reading the law on workforce housing in New Hampshire, learning, and then meeting with people. I've met with developers and I asked them everything. There was, I did a Google search for workforce housing New Hampshire. Well, there's a Seacoast Regional Workforce Housing Coalition Facebook group. That woman who runs it is gold. She knows everything. She's on my speed dial. I get as much information from her as possible. I have put everything together. And then the other thing too is I watch planning meetings now because of the COVID. I actually go on the City of Nashua website and watch past planning meetings to learn the lingo, to learn what can be done. One of my old childhood friends is a real estate lawyer here in Nashua. He's representing me for getting in front of the planning board because I got, every deal I do is going to require some type of a variance. I've got to learn that whole entire process. It's the same thing. Let me tell you something, Chris. It's the same thing. Remember when you didn't understand anything about multifamily, but it just, there was something about it that you just you knew it was what made your blood boil, made you get up in the morning. That's the same thing about development. So if you feel that way, start learning it. And I'll tell you something. We've had more opportunities come across our desk to develop than we have on the buying and owning performing assets in Southern New Hampshire. It just, everyone's beating each other up for the same thing. And Chris, all it is just knowledge. and just having enough guts to say, hey, why not me? Why not? I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. That's how you do it.
Let me play devil's advocate real quick, because you said you see more opportunities. Do you think you're seeing more opportunities because there's more opportunity to develop? Or do you think you're seeing more potential opportunities because you don't know as much about development yet as you do about existing multifamily, and you're not as quick as figuring out which opportunities are good and which aren't yet?
That's great question. And here's the thing is, because I've got my background in owning and operating apartments, I think I look at the development opportunities differently. A lot of these developers just build and sell. They take their money and they move on to the next deal. We look at it as, hey, we could build, we can sell, we can own and operate, we can, build a portfolio. We can do so many other things than just build it and move on to the next one. So when I have an opportunity across my desk, I think about, geez, what do I want to do here? Is this, 72 units? Do I want to own those? Yeah, 72, that brand new, property, low maintenance. Yeah, maybe that might be a good one to own and operate. Or I could flip it. I could sell it. And I could, you do the cap rate and the numbers are so huge, with what you're able to build it for and what it's worth. So it's, I'll tell you, you're right. I'm still absolutely a baby in this business, and I don't know what I don't know. But man, it's a lot of fun to find out. We're doing one. It's going to be one of our first ones, 4 units. Okay. I have to get a variance. I have to merge 3 lots together. And guess what? It has asbestos on the property. So what do? I didn't know. Well, I've got the engineering report right here. It cost me $1,500. They're going to go in there. They're going to cap it. They're going to, and everything's going to be fine. And that's, but we got to add that cost into the mix of the whole thing. So it's just, you're just problem solving the whole way through and getting down to the very end. Just like you do when you buy apartments. It's the same thing. You problem solve the whole way through. You get over the roadblocks. They're always throwing roadblocks in your way.
Does the legal background help avoid mistakes? I know my partner always talks about it. We have to create a list of everything that we want to ask for in a contract. When you said it, you don't know what you don't know, but does the legal side of it, because earlier you said, when you take on clients, you're not going to represent them, you're going to advise them on a consulting basis. When you're looking at a deal, do you think that helps? And not help, like you said, you don't know, but does that protect your downside or your backside, where you could say, okay, I read this code, I really understand this, but when I go put it in contract, I'm going to make sure I have this out. Does that help and or aid in the shift? Forget the economics behind the supply and demand, but do you think that helps, or how can that help, or how can someone bring that person onto their team to help them?
Yeah, I tell you, with also my experience, my education, my experience of being in real estate and helping clients for 12 years now, seeing all the different ways that clients get themselves into trouble. Listen, guys, I'm too old to get in trouble. I've made and lost millions twice. I'm not looking to do it again. So I'm very careful. My partner in this, who's one of my clients, he's a younger guy, and he's ready to go. Hey, let's go do this. I said, not so fast. We're going to do this. We're going to take our time. We're going to make sure we do it right. And if it doesn't work, we just move on to the next one. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the contracts, the realtor sent over the contract. One of those, I hate form contracts. I, rewrote it, and so that I understand everything that's in that contract. That's one of the problems most people have. I do a whole class on the purchase and sale contract for multifamily, and I go through every single paragraph and explain to you exactly what each one means. And if this happens, then this is what the outcome is going to be because of that provision. And, most people who have done multifamily have never read the contract. They just think, oh, my lawyer took care of it. Read the contract. If you know the rules, you're going to win the game. So absolutely, being a lawyer and my experience has helped out immensely. And it makes me go into this knowing that I can do this. I can do this.
So let me ask another counterpoint. If I'm not a lawyer, do you still think it's worth my time to read and understand contracts, or is my time better spent on the things I know I can do and I'm going to get value from, right? Because I pay the lawyer a certain amount of money because you're way better than I'm ever going to be. And I'd basically be doing a job that provides no value to me. Plus I don't have the certifications or whatever. But is there the counterpoint of like, hey, why am I going to spend time where it's going to provide not as much value as the stuff I'm very good at that I know is going to produce a lot, right? Like the whole 80-20 rule, 80% of your time you waste, 20% produces 80% of your value. How does that factor into it?
This is your business. You're asking people to invest in your deal. And you don't know the contract. You're relying on someone else. You had better be the best quarterback of that deal and understand everything. You have to know your business better than your lawyer, because your lawyer in most cases is just reactionary. You call him when a problem creeps up. He doesn't proactively warn you, hey, this is what's going to happen next. See, this is why my business, the Multifamily Investing Academy, is so unique in that I am a lawyer and also I'm an investor. And I've been through this so many times so that I have seen so many different examples of where things go wrong that I can warn my students. When I was actively buying properties down in the early 2000s, I wasn't coaching anyway. I was still a lawyer, but I had my investor cap on. I had great lawyers. They could close escrow, they could draft a great contract, but they could never tell me if it was a good deal or not, because they didn't know multifamily. So you've got to be in control of all aspects. I had one buddy of mine, he was a lawyer, and because he was a lawyer, we won the softball league every single year. We weren't better. He just knew the rules, and he knew that, okay, at 8:45, we can throw out our last pitch. And after that, they have to shut down. So we just need to get, and he knew how to play all the rules and to win. And that's what you have to do when you look at your purchase and sale contract. If you don't have a purchase and sale contract that you've drafted that protects you, and you go with like some lawyer, form contract, man, that thing is played right down the middle. And you don't have those get out of jail free provisions if things go wrong for you. My students have get out of jail free provisions built into that contract all over the place because I've had to use them before in my past experience.
I love it. I think it's important. I think I'm very happy you said that. That was, the answer I was looking for. Yeah. I think it relates a lot to when people ask, like, do you guys manage the properties? And we say, no, we use property managers. And they say like, oh, well, what do you do? And our response is, well, we asset manage, and we basically manage the managers, because exactly to your point, we have to do a lot of stuff that is proactive, where a lot of the stuff they do is reactive. They're also proactive too, because they're hands-on day to day, but it's looking at the big picture, looking at the financials, understanding what our investors are looking for and how it relates to the property. And it's not always easy for them to see how we see things, because we're looking through a different lens, and we have multiple different lenses that we're looking through for all the different parties involved. So it's a great point. It's, the same thing. Your attorney isn't looking at the deal and understanding what your goals are to achieve, but if you can understand what the contract is and what you're looking to achieve, they're just going to help you navigate those waters with a fine-tooth comb better than you can on your own.
You just reminded me of back, before I got into real estate investing, I owned an insurance company. And, I remember when someone from one department would come up to me with a problem, and they would explain the problem to me. And, I just kind of pause and look at it. And they were all exasperated, like, well, what are you going to do about it? Why aren't you responding? And I'm thinking to myself, because when I fix your one problem, it's going to have an impact on 9 other departments, and I've got to figure out how all of that comes together. So, that's when you have that 30,000 foot view on your business and you understand everything that's going on. Not everybody else understands. Like you're having a problem with a vendor, and he's threatening to throw a mechanics lien on your property. And that, geez, this property is financed with that dust lender, and if they see a workman's lien go on the property, they're going to increase my interest rate. The person doesn't understand all those types of things that go on. So you gotta be the quarterback.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So as you're looking, well, actually, I'm gonna take a step back because I'm curious. Are you when you're doing any multifamily deals or now developing, are you solely using like in-house money, your own money, or are you going to investors for equity positions?
The first deal is all my own money.
Okay.
I don't want to tap into anybody. Then what we'll do is I have some joint venture partners. I don't want to syndicate. I just want other partners who have, expertise, and they're coming to the table with probably cash, and let them run the cash, and we'll go out there and develop. And keep it very tight. I don't want to do a major syndication. I don't want to. I just don't want to have to deal with a whole lot of hands out, and I don't want to have to deal with the SEC. Mm-hmm. So that's I want to keep it within a tight partnership of like-minded people.
So are you developing the first one yourself with your own money because you feel if there's any mistakes that you don't know, it's your own money, or is it just because it's a much smaller deal that you can just afford to do it yourself and you want it for yourself?
Both, but both answers are correct. And the thing is, I don't listen. If I blow it, it's my money. I didn't hurt anybody else. So I'm doing it with my own money. The next one, we should be able to pull off on our own. If the 72 unit, I'll tell you that the ways. Everything that you've learned about financing multifamily parlays very nicely into how you're going to structure the deal for the development. And there are ways that you just buy the land, develop the land, and then you can like if we use modular housing, one of these modular housing places does hard money. Mm-hmm. And that's another way, with development, because you're turning them so fast, you can do hard money on these deals. And you don't have to deal with the Fannies and the Freddies. And then once you build the whole thing, then you can refinance it and pull money out or sell it or whatever.
So I think what could help a lot of people is, you're not having a ton of investors, but you are having, JV partners or investors to a certain degree. As you're going into a new venture and a different venture, how are you making them comfortable trusting in you through this process? Because I think, one, it's good to hear how you're transitioning, but I think a lot of people that are looking to start, raising investor money or find joint venture partners, how do you build up that trust and that track record when you don't have as much in that particular aspect or at all?
Yeah. Well, first up, like for instance, right as soon as we hang up this call, I've got a call with an investor. And we're talking about one particular deal, and we're going through all the things that we're going to accomplish this week on this particular deal. And that is, you can't have that type of granular discussion if you've got 35 investors on your deal. Mm-hmm. On this one, when I say they're a joint venture partner, they are. They're not. I've seen some of these guys try to skirt the securities laws by bringing in 30 investors and giving them a little bit of a role so they qualify as joint venture partners, and we don't really have to go through the full syndication. That's bull, and mm-hmm. you're setting yourself up for problems. The partners are my friends. They're guys who do this, and they're involved, and I've known them for years, and that's how you get into my clique. So I'm not doing a mass mailing or a mass advertising. No way. We're flying below the radar.
I love it. That makes sense. So how do you then, again, because I want to help somebody that's listening, how do you make that person comfortable with doing something new that you don't have? I know you have the track record in other stuff, so you're probably, in a much better position than most people listening to this, but what have you been doing that they can extrapolate and replicate for themselves if they're thinking, hey, today, 5 years, 10 years, I want to start utilizing investor money because it allows me to either diversify further, increase my own returns, et cetera, et cetera.
One of the things is that, I'll give you an example. I have one partner who we're talking to. This guy's got buku bucks. He's got to put it to use. And what we're thinking about doing is setting up a joint venture partnership with him, where his role in the partnership is to control the money. I'm putting up $500,000 of my own money, so I'm putting that into a bank account, and he's putting in $1 million, and he's in control of the money. Hey, John, you need to write a check to this guy this week. and he's in control. So there's a guy, if he can feel any better, hey, you're partners with us, but you're the guy in charge of the money. Mm-hmm. It's not like you gave me $1 million of your own money and I lost it. It's sitting in a bank account that you have direct access to because you're my partner. So that's one of the ways that we're talking about structuring joint venture partners and making them feel at ease that we're doing it the right way. And, the one of the deals that we're looking at doing, and this one happens to be an 11-unit subdivision. So this is just houses. And the beautiful thing about that is, we build one, we sell it, we build the next one, and we pay off bills. And, by the time we get to the sixth one, we own it free and clear, and everything after that is gravy. So, that's the way we're looking at doing that type of a structure.
Gotcha. That makes sense. John, you want to add to that? Because obviously, at one point you started from little to no track record.
So I know when people are first starting, because we always get the question, how do you raise money and can you just start calling people? And I always tell people, no, I mean, you can do whatever you want, but you don't want to get caught doing something not supposed to do. So what we did, or what I did early on, you want to start, friends, family, people, and you want to start today for your deal in 10 years, in 5 years, in 5 months. You don't want to start when you find a deal. And I'm sure all the deals that you've done, these are guys that you've worked with in the past and or have built a relationship with over 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. But I think the thing that any investor that's not doing it all with his own money and he's bringing on money, you have to educate every single person you talk to so they understand it how you understand it. And like you said, hey, you want to control the money, that's fine. It's just me and you. I wouldn't necessarily let someone control the money if there was 30 people in the deal.
Never.
But no. Of course.
Yeah.
But you got them. You need them to you have to educate all your investors as if they don't know anything about real estate, anything about what you're doing. So you first did your first development you're doing now. Now I'm sure you're talking to people and saying, oh, I've read the code and I know that to get 100 units, we're going to need a variance based on this density. You explain that to people. Yeah. And then now they start realizing, okay, I understand this better than I thought. Then once you have a deal, it's a lot easier to go to that guy and say, hey, you can control the money, but you know this process, right? This week we have to check off 15 things off our checklist. And through the whole process, they understand it. And I think that is what the biggest key in my mind when raising money and bringing in investors. One, you can't just call people up and ask for money. You gotta offer them the opportunity to invest, but you gotta offer them the opportunity through a series of educational events through your education, right? If you go to a conference and you learn something, you can email your whole database and say, hey, I just really picked up this really interesting information about about cap rates, about shrinking expenses. And if you do that over time, people will start coming onto your side of the coin. And then I have a deal becomes a lot easier to raise money. Have you seen that over your?
Oh my God, John, you talk like you've done this before, because here's the thing. One thing you just said about you're thinking about doing it 5, 10 years down the road. What you have to explain to people is that you're building a business. This isn't a one-off. You're not going to make all your money by doing one deal. You're doing this over the next 10 to 20 years. So do it slowly and systematically in the right way and educate these people. And I'll tell you, talk about education. That's a great, great point. The problem with some of these new investors have that looking to do their first deal is they think that the people that they're talking to about money know as much about multifamily as they do. They haven't been sitting in those weekend boot camps. They haven't been listening to Charlie Dobens on webcasts. They haven't done any of those things. So when you show up and ask them for money for a multifamily deal, you got to explain to them what multifamily is so they understand it. And that is so key that people don't get that. It's building you and what you said is perfect example is when my wife and I were first getting started, our first deal, before we even had our first deal done, we were building up the names of the of our database of investors. And like you said, any time anything happened in our travels through this business, we would let our whole list know. Hey, we just put an offer in on this property. Hey, guess what? That deal fell through, and here's why. And so 6 months later, when we finally got that first deal and we went out to the world and said, hey, we're looking to raise money, we had money in 9 days because everybody on our list knew what we were doing. They understood multifamily. They understood what our goals were, and they went out and signed on up. And that was because we took the time and built up that side of the business, the investor side. So you're absolutely right. That's if I didn't know you, John, I would say, wow, that guy's done it a couple of times, because that's exactly how you do this business.
Oh, I think he froze, but awesome. I think it's really well put. I couldn't agree more. I think one of the things that is tough to realize too is remembering that even as you get more and more educated, being able to take those concepts and explain them very simply is hypercritical when you're talking to people. It's something I continue to struggle with, but I think I'm getting better at, is being able to take those high level concepts, those things that are second nature to you, and breaking them down into very easy to understand, manageable concepts. So, people can start to get educated through you. And if they are looking to be a passive investor in deals, they feel that they understand what they're getting themselves into. They trust you as an expert, and they know that, hey, as things come up, he's going to be able to explain it to me in a way that I understand, whether it's good or bad, because there's plenty of ways you could explain it that you wouldn't understand. But if you can communicate effectively with people and that they can understand, comprehend, and then, do what they will, I think that's an understated value that you need to be able to do as well.
I teach 2 segments of my weekend classes. One of them is the power of the cap rate. And by the time you're done under my presentation of the power of the cap rate, you get it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, wow, I've got to get into multifamily because of that cap rate. And then the other thing that I teach is the 5 ways to make money in multifamily. And as a result, why multifamily is better than owning a Subway franchise. Mm-hmm. And, and I had a couple walk up to me who were clients of mine, and they said, hey, we really understood what you were talking about with the Subway franchise because we own a Subway franchise. And you're absolutely right. That we don't get paid like you do in multifamily.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic place to wrap it up. Excuse me. Charles, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it. I think this was fantastic. If somebody wants to learn more about you, get in touch with you, follow along, where can they do all of that?
You go to my website, go to www.multifamilyinvestingacademy.com. And you get all my free stuff. You can find out about me, where I'm not speaking in the future, and what new things I'm coming out with. I'm actually doing a joint venture coming up with Jillian Sidoti for securities law, coupled with my training. So that'll be coming out too, and you can find out all about it on the website. So it'll be cool. And John. And Chris, John wasn't as bad as you said he was. He really wasn't. I can tell you that right now. So
yeah. I appreciate.
Today was a good day.
I'm harsh sometimes.
Okay. See, but you're New York. See, and I'm Boston, so it's like we talk the same language.
We got a little bit of a thicker skin. People could take it. Sometimes you talk to people in the South and other places, and they're like, "Oh no."
Don't get me going about Texas, man. Don't get me going about Texas.
We won't. But I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. If you're not already subscribed, would appreciate it if you would do so. And if you are, please send it to a friend, family member, or colleague that you think would enjoy this and get a tremendous amount of value. We also just launched a Facebook group. We would love if you go check it out. We are trying to connect with everybody who listens and subscribes to the podcast, connect with you, bring you as much value. Hopefully you can bring some value to us as well, and we can all grow together. You can check that out by going to Facebook and searching the Real Estate Investing Experience. And Charles, once again, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing.
Thanks, gentlemen. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Good time. Talk to you soon.